All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this rather gray and rainy day here in Alabama. We appreciate you joining us for today's webinar on using data for your campaign. Also wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining us for last week's webinar on advanced FAFSA completion, and as well as let you know that next week we'll be having our fourth webinar in 4 weeks on the American Graduate, which is an exciting program put on by Alabama Public Television. So please stay tuned for more on that. We'd love for you to join us for that webinar next Thursday at 9 a.m. So for today's webinar, using data is key to track your FAFSA completion progress and improvement. In this webinar, learn how to utilize 2 game-changing tools to strengthen your campaign. So I also would like to say thank you to Miss Vicky Ohlson, who you can see here from the Alabama Community College System. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll also be joined by Leonard of AIC, or the Alabama Commission on Higher Education, shortly to give us their insight. These two are just excellent resources. The information today that you'll be learning on the webinar is truly invaluable, but I'd also like to add that we are resources outside of our webinars as well. So we are happy to be in touch with you, happy to share our resources. Please call or email. We're always available and always here to be helpful. So without further ado, I'm going to close my video, and Vicky, you can close yours as well. And we'll get started with the presentation. Okay, and while we get started with the presentation, I'm also going to launch a poll. I like to do this really anytime we have a webinar, just to try to get you, the audience, engaged, so we can figure out, who is on the webinar and also where you're from. So I've just launched the poll. You should see that popping up on your screen now if you'd like to click on who you are and where you're from. That's just useful information to us to know who's utilizing this tool and this sort of professional development that we offer as a part of the Alabama College campaign. So like I said, today's topic is using data for your campaign. We're going to go over a couple of really unique tools, but before we get into that, I'd like to do a quick refresher on all things financial aid and what using data for your campaign really means. So when we say campaign, we're talking about the Alabama College campaign. Our effect, or rather our belief, is that every high school senior should apply to at least one college and complete their FAFSA. And it's, our role to assist guidance counselors and career coaches in helping achieve that goal. The data that we're referring to is actually tracking FAFSA completion. So we can do that at the state level, we can do that at the county level, we can do that at the district level, and we can do that all the way down to the school level. And then Vicky and Ron will talk about how we can go one step farther and track that at the student level. So with that said, I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to share the results so that everybody else can see where our participants are from. Got a lot of counselors today, a lot of people from North Alabama, some Central Alabama. So again, thank you all for joining. We got somebody joining on our end. Ron, is that you guys?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well. Thank you. We're just about to get started with our presentation. All right. I can't get, are you guys seeing the poll on your end still?
No, I'm seeing the FAFSA Fast Facts.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll start there. Starting with a little bit of background on FAFSA. Everybody knows what FAFSA is. It's the free application for federal student aid. I'd also like to talk about the Pell Grant. Pell Grant is a means for paying for education after high school that does not have to be paid back. Most high school students in Alabama qualify for a Pell Grant. The maximum amount a student can receive from a Pell Grant per year is $6,195. That is up this year. That's a new number. Last year it was $6,095, so this just went up $100 about a month ago. The average cost of two-year college in Alabama is $5,781, and that's from the U.S. Department of Education's a survey. So the difference between the Max Pell Grant and the average cost of 2 years school in Alabama is about $400. And then lastly, 9 out of 10 students that complete the FAFSA enroll in college the following fall. That's a really important statistic and one that we lean heavily on in this conversation that we have around FAFSA completion. It's not just 9 out of 10 students that complete the FAFSA enroll in some form of post-secondary education. It's that they enroll in college the following fall. And that's something that we are really driven by in this campaign, and something that we hope you can also find some drive from. All right. Vicky, do you want to go over this slide? I know this is something that you present on regularly. Would you like to speak to this?
I'd be glad to. The percent of high school graduates qualifying for a Pell Grant in Alabama is around 60%. And these, if you would, Colby, if you will click, because I've got these numbers that show up on the slide as we go along. So if 60% of high school graduates will qualify for a Pell Grant, but we're only averaging around 50 to 55% of our students who even apply for the Pell Grant, we've got a lot of money that's going to waste in this state. 44% of high school graduates fail to complete the FAFSA. And of course, if they don't complete the FAFSA, then they can't qualify for things like Pell Grants, scholarships, low interest loans, those kinds of things that help them get through college. In Alabama last year, over 20,000 students failed to complete the FAFSA. That's really unacceptable. With the need for skilled workers that we have in this state, with unemployment being as low as it is, we have to get as many of our high school seniors into college as we possibly can if we're going to sustain our economic growth. Now, 60% of that 20,000 would have qualified for a Pell Grant. So over 12,000 students who could have got that $6,100 a year last year for college this year, they just missed out on that money. And because an average Pell Grant for an Alabama student is around $3,700, then we're talking serious money that's left on the table unclaimed, in excess usually of $45 million a year. And what's even more disturbing is that in Alabama, our high school graduates are not enrolling in higher education one way or the other in the year following high school. 1 out of 3 students don't enroll in higher education anywhere. And that's not only enrolling in college in Alabama, they don't go out of state. They don't go to a private college. So what are they doing? And a lot of people say, well, they're probably getting a job or they're going into the military. Well, in Alabama, fewer than 2% of our high school graduates go in the military. So if they're not going on to college and they're not going into the military, what they're most likely doing is nothing, or taking a dead-end job in which they can't advance. So getting these students to complete the FAFSA and look towards college, this is what we really need to be working towards, and what I have to commend Alabama Possible for doing.
Thank you, Vicky. I appreciate that. I needed to sort out a little bit of technical difficulties on my side. So now I'm going to switch views over to the first tool that I'd like to talk about today, and that's the Cash for College tool. Let me just go to Data Dashboard. Okay, so this is a tool that lives on the Cash for College website or on the Alabama Possible website. It's alabamapossible.org/dashboard. This is something that we actually just made live yesterday, so we're excited to have this useful tool up and running again this year. And this tool we find to be very useful in taking a macro view at FAFSA completion, again, around the state, each county, district level, and then all the way down to the school level. We think that as a part of your Alabama College campaign, it's important to look at your FAFSA completion trends at your school, in your county, and in your district year over year so that you can find the successes in your campaign. So maybe you were hosting a workshop for FAFSA completion, or there was a pep rally, or you were working towards college application priority deadlines and you were having success there. But it also allows you to see where you can find room for improvement. So without any further ado, I'm just going to introduce you to a couple of the features here. Like I said, this allows you to look at FAFSA completion comparing one year to another. As you can see, this year we are very close to where we were this time last year. And in fact, if you look at the line graph down here, there's a green bit that represents this year, gray represents last year. So as the year goes on and more data comes in, the green line will continue to grow and hopefully start going a little bit higher than the gray bar as well. Like I said, you'll also be able to zoom in a little bit by school level. So if you click on the second tab, you'll see FAFSA completion rates for the entire state with all of the schools that we have available at this time. You can unclick and then re-click schools like so, and you'll be able to actually zoom in even further by clicking on their school name, and it'll take you to a tab, school detail tab over here, similar to what we were looking at the state level, but you can see the pie graph, you can see this year versus last year, and there's also a line graph. So congrats to ARAB. Looks like they've had a great start to the year. And then without getting into too much more detail, there are similar tools available for the district level as well as a list by district and county here. So one thing that I forgot to mention at the top of the broadcast is that throughout the presentation, should you have any questions with regards to the tools that we're talking about or the information that we're presenting you, please go ahead and submit those to us. There's a chat feature built into Zoom, which is the webinar platform that we use. There's also a Q&A feature. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and submit those to us either through Q&A or through the chat. I'm going to monitor that throughout today's webinar, and I'll either stop our presenters and ask them to answer during the presentation or hold them to the end. So if you don't hear me answer the question during the webinar, we will get to it at the end, I promise you that. So with that said, I would like to hand it over to Ron. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Ron, do you have the ability to take control of the screen?
Yes.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. This is Ron Leonard. I'm the Director of Special Initiatives at AIC. And with me today is Nikisha Ross, who works in our IT department. Several of you are probably familiar with Nikisha. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at the actual FAFSA completion portal website. In just a second, I'm going to show you around if you're not already familiar with it. And then for student security and privacy, we're going to shift to a PowerPoint presentation. We've done actual screen captures of a live version of this, but we removed student data and we made a PowerPoint presentation. So real quickly, once again, here we are at the FAFSA homepage, and if you simply type fafsa.ake.edu, you can see the FAFSA completion portal. Now, this is available to the general public 24/7 all around the world, but there is no student data here. At AIC, we take student data, student safety, security, as very important. So you won't see any student information here. If you, as you can see from the pie chart across the top, we're off to a good start. We've only been doing this for a month and we've already got 13% completed. Now, if you scroll down, you can search by either district or school. And here, for example, I'm going to do a quick and dirty search for the schools in Jefferson County. And if I scroll down, I can see the schools in Jefferson County. Notice that there are a number, so you'll need to go to the second page to see them all. Where you see a number of cohort, as you can see, if you just scroll over that, one of the new features, nice new features, is you get these little information icons and you can learn more about each different heading. You'll notice in some places there's a little asterisk. You may not have noticed, but if there's 50 or fewer students in the senior class where they have cohort, they'll use an asterisk. Now, if you go to the full version, the live version, you'll actually see the students for that particular school. So don't let this confuse you. Just be mindful of it. I think everything here is pretty self-explanatory. The percentage that have been submitted, the number that have been completed, and the percentage that have been completed. Now, let me give you another option. We will actually, this time around, I'm going to delete this and I'm going to search for a particular school. So let's say you're in Montgomery County, which is my home, and I wanted to see how Brubaker was doing. So I'm just going to type Brubaker and press the enter key, and I can see the completion rate for Brubaker, one of the magnet schools. And as you can see, they're off to a really good start. Now, if you want to see who's at the head of the pack, there's a nice new feature. If you go to Summary and go to Current Rankings, in just a second, we'll see the top districts and then the top schools. Now here, if you scroll down, you can see the top districts. And right away is Alabama School of Fine Arts. They're really doing a fantastic job, as you can see. But there's some other really good school districts as well. Now, if you scroll down to the bottom, wow, look at Appalachian School, already at 63%. And Sologent, they're in Lamar County, doing a great job at 53%. Now, let's say you want to see what your school district is doing. So here, similar to that search I did before, I'm going to enter Jefferson. While we're waiting, you can search by school district, you can search by school, you can search by the size of the cohort, etc. Now, the Jefferson County is doing a little bit better than the state. As you can see, 15% versus 13%. And if you scroll down, you can see the completion rate for the different schools. Out in front is Corner, good for Corner. Closely behind, Shades Valley. Now, from that same link, the summary link, if you want to go back and look at previous years, you'll get that same pie chart you saw before, but you can see the completion rates. And as you can see, for this past season, we improved our completion rate. So we got up to about 57%. We want to really improve more this coming year. One other thing I want to point out to you, if you go over to district maps and click 2019-2020, you can see the completion rate for the districts in the state. Now, as you would expect, considering we've just started within a month's time, it's still a sea of red, but I'm sure in due time, it's going to look like the 2018, 2019. And here, the darker the green, the higher the completion rate. The lighter colors, the kind of coral colors, the lower completion rate. So if you want to see how your district did here in a visual way, this is how you can do it. One other thing I want to point out to you here, if you go to resources, if your school district hasn't already signed the use agreement with AIC, here is where you can access it. Now, speaking of the use agreement, it was approved by the General Counsel for the Alabama State Department of Education. So it is the contract that they chose. Now, we want each system to have the option of either signing or not signing it, but we hope that all the systems will ultimately sign it. So if you want to share this with your superintendent, if the district hasn't already signed the use agreement, here it is. Now, importantly, at the end of this, the superintendent or someone in the Board of Education office will need to fill out Appendix A and Appendix B. This is where you identify who can have access to the portal. So again, if your school district hasn't signed the use agreement, encourage your superintendent to sign it. If he or she has any questions, by all means, get in touch with me. All right, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to switch from the live version to the PowerPoint version. So if you'll bear with us for just a second. As I mentioned, the reason we're going to use the PowerPoint is because we take student privacy, student safety, security, very important at AIC. So in this short PowerPoint presentation, we have removed all student data. But I think once you see it, you'll get a good idea for the actual live version. Now, on this homepage, once again, that's the URL. All you have to type in your browser is fafsa.aic.edu. Now, I mentioned a minute ago there are different types of users. We looked at the public view where there's no student information. At the next level are the approved users. And in the use agreement that I just pointed out to you, these are referred to as high school data custodians. They're the vast majority of the people who have access to the portal. It could be the career coach, it could be the counselor, it might even be the principal. They, in most cases, they will only see the students for one school, all the students for one school. Now, there are exceptions. Sometimes a career coach may work for 2 or 3 systems, and so they may need access to different systems. If the superintendent or someone at the board will notify me, then we can set up those individuals. The other way they can be added is by the local access manager. That is the next level. That's that blue circle that you see there. Not only can they see students for one school, they can see student data for all the schools in the district. Also, they can add and delete accounts as needed. And then finally are the system administrators. That is my colleague, Nikisha, and me. Now, when we were on the home page a minute ago, I didn't point out to you, but in the upper right hand corner is a link called Login. If you will click that, what you'll see next is that first screen capture. And you will enter your username and your password. Your username is going to be your work email address, and then the password will be provided by AIC. What we're doing is we are sending out passwords and encrypted emails, but we're also sending step-by-step instructions for opening those encrypted emails. We're doing that, again, for security, for safety purposes. Now, once you type in your username and password, you're going to click Login, and then you will see the home page, which is over on your right-hand side. But there will be a new link at the top called Student Detail. And you will just take your mouse and you'll cursor over that, and then you'll want to select the most current year, 2019, 2020. That's what we're working in. Obviously, if you wanted to look at student completion rates for previous years, you would just select the appropriate year. Now, once you open the student detail page, and as you can see, if you look in the left-hand corner of the screen capture, we're on 2019, 2020. This is where the vast majority of your work is going to be performed. And I want to point out a few things on this page to you if you're not already familiar with the student detail page. The first thing I want to point out to you is everything is alphabetized by district, then by school name, and then by last name and first name. Again, we have removed the school names, the first names, and the last names, but this is an actual screen capture from the portal. Now, also notice there are a number of different ways that you can search. You can search by the student's last name, you can search by the school name, you can even search by FAFSA status, which we'll take a look at in just a second. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to some of the links closer to the bottom of the page, which we've identified with red circles. There, importantly, is whether the FAFSA has been completed or not. And then if you look in FAFSA detail, it can tell you if it hasn't been completed, the reasons why. Another important column across the bottom is if the student has been selected for verification. If there's a Y there, it means yes, that the student has been selected for verification. I mentioned that particular column because you may need to do a little bit more hand holding with those students and parents that are going through verification, because they're going to have to provide some additional documentation. Now, just a couple other things I want to mention here. Across the bottom, you'll see student, let me go back just for a second. You'll see a column student ID and date of birth. We remove that information. So again, the student is safe, secure. We always remove the state ID, which is Social Security number, and the date of birth. One other thing I want to point out to you, look at that note in the lower left-hand corner. Local access managers can create and delete accounts. A little key as to whether you've got that access, if you're a local access manager, look across the top right underneath detail, you'll notice administration. So that's a clue that you have that you are designated a local access manager. Now, of course, if you're not sure what status you have, you can always call either Nikisha or me, or just drop us an email. We'll be glad to look it up for you. Now, I mentioned to you a minute ago, you can search a wide variety of ways. In this example, what we have done is we have done a FAFSA status search of those students whose FAFSA is not complete for Jefferson County. What you don't see is me having searched in Jefferson or added Jefferson to that, but that's what the actual search is. If you look across the bottom where you see district name, that's a search of Jefferson County. And then if you look over in FAFSA detail, you can see that they're all not complete. All right, I want to mention to you a couple of other things. We are updating the portal on a monthly basis. That is, we're doing it twice a month. We'll do it at the beginning and the middle of the month. And then for the months of January, February, and March, which is crunch time, as many of you know, we will do it on a weekly basis. Now, sometimes the student data that we get from the federal government doesn't match the student data that we get from the Alabama State Department of Education. So in those situations, what we need for you to do is first compare the student's Social Security number on iNow with what's on FAFSA, otherwise what the federal government is providing or identifying. And then if students aren't listed, what you can do is you can send via email a password-protected Excel file to our email address, fafsa.ake or at ake.edu, with school district, school name, student's last name, first name, date of birth, social security number. Now remember, to password protect that, we will ultimately remove that identifying information. But when you're sending it via email, we want to make sure that it's safely sent. And then if you do have additional questions, please contact my colleague, Nikisha. If you need virtual or on-site training, I can provide that if you provide some ample notice. So you can just drop us an email or give me a call. Here is our contact information. If you send an email to fafsa@ake.edu, one of the two of us will try and respond as quickly as possible. I travel a lot from time to time, so if I'm not here, then Nikisha will try and provide a quick answer to your question. All right, at this time, we're going to stop and we're going to answer any questions that you have.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ron and Vicky. As Ron said, we're happy to answer any questions you have now. If you'd like to submit those either through the chat feature or through the Q&A feature in Zoom, we'd be happy to answer those questions. Ron and Vicky, I think you guys had some questions that you'd like to go over as well. Is that correct?
I think Ron did a great job on the presentation. I can't think of any that I have right this minute that I know others might have. Did we have any questions submitted from the webinar participants?
No, not yet. We can just give it a couple more seconds. I did want to also share my contact information, which I've done so through the chat feature. For anybody that'd like to get in touch with me about questions for Cash for College, our data dashboard, or otherwise, you're welcome to reach out at any time. I think I'm a pretty friendly person, so always happy to pick up the phone and talk through any questions you may have. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Ron and the entire team over at AIC, as well as Vicky, for joining us today to share their insights. I think it's always helpful to hear directly how sort of the behind the scenes works when it comes to this incredibly useful and important tool for FAFSA completion and tracking your students' FAFSA completion. So I've got one question come in, and I'm just going to read it. It's going to be for you, Ron. Can you tell me again about the password to enter the portal? I entered my username as my email, but didn't hear about the password. So could you just talk about the process?
When we get the use agreement, we will designate a password. Now, once in a while, a password won't work. We test the passwords before we send them out, but once in a while, after someone has received one's password, they won't work. So we can create new passwords. We just need to know if you're having trouble with a password, and then we'll go in and we'll test your password. And if it's not working, we can create a new password for you. But unless the password is not working, you'll use the same password from year to year. Now, sometimes email addresses will change. So you'll just need to be sure to use your original email address. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be your work email address that we use for individuals. So you'll need to use your original email address, or you'll need to contact us with your new email address.
Thanks, Ron. And we actually did get in a tangential question, and I know you answered it in your answer to the previous question, but just to make sure our participants heard, does the password from the previous year still work, or do you get a new one?
The password will work from year to year.
Excellent. All right, I've got another question that's just come in. So when looking at our list of students that have completed or submitted the FAFSA, I know kids are missing that should be on the list. What do we need to do to figure out why these kids are not on the list, and how can we get them added or corrected?
Once again, as I mentioned, sometimes the data that we get from the federal government and from the Alabama State Department of Education doesn't match. So what we encourage individuals to do is to get in touch with us, in particular to reach out to Nikisha. And then if there are a number of students, then we can have the educator send to us via a password protected Excel file the student's first name, last name, date of birth, social security number, the district, school, etc. And then we can add those students. So the first thing you might want to do is just reach out to Nikisha via either the email or the phone number, and then we'll work with you to try and add those students.
Thank you, Ron. I think that that's a good note for me to say. After this webinar is completed, we'll be sending out all of these resources that we've discussed, as well as contact information, so that you can have that directly at your fingertips and follow up on some of the conversations that we're having here in order to make your campaign as successful as possible. So please be on the lookout for that email from me very soon so that you can keep this going.
Colby, I have one question for the attendees. I'm curious to know if there are future changes to the portal, if Colorado, and when I say Colorado, the Colorado Higher Education Department is where we get the software from. If there are future enhancements, what enhancements would the attendees like to see in the next version or a future version of the portal?
Sure. So I'd like to offer up the chat feature as a great place to submit your ideas for that. But also, Ron, if you'd like, I could help you create a quick survey just that I can include in our follow-up email to collect any information on changes or optimizations as you describe them from our participants. I appreciate you bringing up that point, because really these tools are here to benefit the participants of today's webinar as well as the other educators around the state. And I think that it's important that we always be listening to the people that we're serving and providing them with the tool that they actually need to have as much success as they can. So just taking a look at Q&A and chat, I haven't seen any responses yet. So Ron, maybe we should put together a survey and I can include that in a follow-up email.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And the reason I mentioned that is because at AIC, we want to hear from you. Now, insofar as the software, I can't guarantee anything, but Nikisha and I can let our colleagues in Colorado who develop the software know what's of interest, what the needs are of our educators here in Alabama. So if you do think of something, by all means.
All right, I think we might have dropped audio on that one. But since there are no more questions, I would just like once again to say thank you to Ron and everybody from AIC, as well as Vicky Ohlson, for joining today's webinar and sharing such useful information. Once again, next week we will be hosting an additional webinar on the American Graduate, which is a program sponsored by the Alabama Public Television. Our speaker will be from APT. So we're excited to welcome her and hope that as many of you are available will participate in that webinar as well. We appreciate you joining today's webinar. Please be on the lookout for my follow-up email. And I encourage all of you to try to stay as dry as possible on this rainy day here in Alabama. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.